What's up, knife freaks, sharpness geeks, and purveyors of static goodness? Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNeese. This is my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatwright.
How you doing?
And as you guys have probably already seen from the thumbnail and can see now, we are joined today by a guest, a very special guest, Mr. Ernest Emerson of Emerson Knives. How are you doing today, Ernie?
I'm doing really well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate you coming on. Like we were just talking before we hit record that you're our first guest, and like we're starting at the top. We decided to go big or go home.
Yeah.
So here we are.
That's normal for you.
Oh yeah. I tend to jump in with both feet. So we're going to run down a quick little for those of you. I'm sure everybody listening to this probably already knows even more than I do about Mr. Emerson, but we're going to run through a quick little bio, hit some high points. We'd be here for the whole podcast. We went over like all the highlights. So we'll just hit a few high points here.
Okay.
So he is the founder and owner.
You embarrass me, man.
No. You just soak it in. You've earned it.
Yeah.
So obviously the founder and owner of Emerson Knives, the founder of Emerson Combat Systems, which is widely taught to, military, law enforcement, civilians, a little bit of everybody. He has been inducted into the Martial Arts Hall of Fame as well as the Blade Magazine Hall of Fame.
Oh, negative story.
Black Belt. I'm sorry. Black Belt
yep.
Magazine Hall. Yeah. I think there was some. I've heard your story about the other. So
yeah.
I need to hear that later. Yeah.
And then so Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame. He's very well known at this point for his work with extensive work with the SEAL teams, developing knives and weapons for them, as well as doing a bunch of training and stuff. I know you've done a bunch of government contract work with supplying stuff to them. This one really caught my attention. He's had his knives displayed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Smithsonian, which, from what I understand, is extremely rare for any living artist to have their stuff displayed there. And I would say for a knife maker, living artist to have their stuff displayed there has got to be super, super rare.
Yeah.
So that's
pretty cool,
mind blowing. Author of many books. I couldn't find an exact number when I was researching, but a lot. And then we all know him as he's essentially the father of the modern tactical knife. So, which I know for me and Chase and for a lot of us, basically, you could say one of the reasons that we're here. So, I don't know that there would have been enough appeal for me to get into knife making, honestly, if it hadn't been for the tactical side of knives. So that was definitely a factor for me. So again, that's just not even a tip of the iceberg, but several of the key points and accomplishments of Mr. Ernest Emerson there. So anything you'd like to add that we missed or left off?
Well, when you mentioned the tactical, I guess just to kind of get going, from my standpoint, I was starting out as a knife maker, and I was making some kind of fancy knives and all that when I first started, or pretty, if you will, decorated and all that. But my heart was always in tools, and right. I grew up on a dairy farm in northern Wisconsin, so the most important thing you have besides your livestock and everything, and family and all that, of course, but is your tools. And so I grew up really just being a tool guy. And when I was making the quote unquote, they call them pre-tax. That's the name people put on the knives I was making at that time.
Right.
I loved doing it. I loved making things real shiny and pretty and all that. But my heart was really in hammers and nails and stuff like that. So the tactical thing was kind of just for me, it was just like a natural evolution to kind of get back to my roots. Right. And then I felt completely at home with the tactical type knives,
right.
Being tools. And
right.
So anyway, you triggered that thought when you mentioned that about tactical.
And that was something not many people were doing at the time, from my understanding, was, that all the, if you go to a knife show, like at the time when you first started, like I'm assuming you were one of, if not the only person with tactical type knives on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. It started out kind of like that. There was other guys. There was, Bob Terzuola, and a few of the other guys that are pretty well known and all that. But a lot of them were making tactical knives, and I'm not saying this about anybody specifically, but a lot of guys made tactical knives or got going in tactical knives because it was the new in thing, so to speak. It became a trend or a category. I went there only because that's what I put in my pocket, and that's where my heart was. So I didn't go and it's funny because you see in the knife custom knife making community and in the factory stuff too. You'll see trends come and go, like little folders are in and big folders are in, and whatever kind of materials are in and all that. And for me, it was really I didn't really have an interest in uh, following any kind of trends or anything. I just wanted to make what I wanted to make, and so that became a trend. So
Right.
that was a cool thing, and I'm happy that happened. I was in the right place at the right time. And you mentioned about the business. In fact, our company, Emerson Knives Incorporated, was, and I'm real proud of this. We were the first tactical knife company.
Hmm.
And I remember talking to Les and Roberta at Benchmade, and I wanted to really jump into the tactical and push the tactical, I guess, genre when I was working with Benchmade and all that. And they were like, "Oh man, I don't know, uh, I don't know. There's kind of too much like weapons and things like that. We got to temper it down and all that." And that was part of the reason that you know. I decided to start our own company in the beginning of the production stuff was I wanted to make tactical knives, and it wasn't a thing. And
Right.
that's just for cops, and nobody's going to be interested in it. I don't think we should go there. And lo and behold, I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, I think we know who was right about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. I mean, I know a lot of makers, they wouldn't sell, I know Bob Loveless wouldn't sell some of his tactical stuff unless you were military or LEO, and,
Yeah.
it was only for that purpose. And so I guess
Hmm.
it was sort of a, new idea. And, that sort of answers one of our questions that we had uh, wanted to ask you about, like, what prompted you to make the decision going from handmade to production, sort of. And
Well, that also kind of has Benchmade as a kind of the nexus of this too, or the center point, if you will. Uh, I remember, I was at the risk of sounding braggadocious. I'm a pretty prolific knife designer, and I really do. This is an honest to God's truth. I have around 2,000 different designs that are all categorized alphabetically. I've got a stack of 3-inch binders at home that we keep in the safe, just in case I get hit by a meteor when I walk out on the street at night. That the company can still continue on with Ernest Emerson designs. But when I was at Benchmade, I said, well, I've got a knife design called the Commander, and I've got a knife design called the Roadhouse, or whatever in the heck it happened to be. And Les looked at me and he said, Ernie, we can't be the Emerson Knife Company. We're Benchmade.
yeah, yeah,
And I said, I got it, I got it, I got it. But at the same time, the machine is kind of whirring the gears up there. And I said, man, one day to my wife, I said, honey, I think we should have our own knife company because we got a lot of good designs. And thanks to Benchmade and everything, along with other really good things that have happened in my life, we had a pretty good notoriety at the time, uh, due in part to the Benchmade project that I did with them, and also uh, largely also due in part to the people that I was working with, because you know you get something really really cool, and or that you think is really really cool, and what's the first thing you want to do? You want to show it to your buddy.
Yep.
And so that spread like wildfire throughout the special operations community, both in the Navy and in the Army and the Marines, and et cetera. And so we had a really good customer base. And then one other thing that's also important in it is, the plumber in Kansas wants to have a knife that the Navy SEALs use. So, I'm that guy. I am that guy too. I mean, when I was playing baseball and everything in my past, I wanted the same glove that Sandy Koufax used or
Yep.
whoever, because it just made me feel connected to that somehow.
Yep.
And so all of those things kind of led to that decision where, I went to my wife pretty much on bended knee and said, honey, and just to round that back a little bit, I had a job at Hughes Aircraft, which was a very, very excellent job. It was actually, for most people, it would have been a dream job because I was in an R&D department, I had my own machine shop, and I had every benefit that you could have from a company and everything, and really good pay. And I went to her and I said, "Hon, I think I want to quit my job and start a company." And she was like, "What?" But I guess she had the confidence in me and maybe the faith that I wasn't going to do something on a lark, so to speak. And so she said, "Okay, let's give it a try." And so one thing led to another, and I had some designs that I wanted to introduce, which we started out with called the Raven, and wanted to do that on a commercial basis. And one thing that was our stepping stone. We formed the company in 1997. I started making knives back in '79, which we can get to that too. That's kind of a little funny story, but that's how that business actually started. It was just a you know uh, combination of a few things that kind of fell together and the pieces locked up. And so, thank God my wife was accommodated my wild fantasies to be able to do this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a testament to what you hear a lot of times, that usually, behind any great man is an even better woman typically. And
100% on
and
that.
at the very least they're supportive, and and
Yeah.
that's, yeah. I very similarly, my wife basically pushed me into, when went from part-time to full-time
Mhm.
knife maker. It was, we were at a
Yeah.
show, and we had a really good show or whatever, and she just looked at me and was like, it's
Yeah.
time.
Let's
And
do this.
so, and then
Well, it's a leap of faith, I
it
mean,
is.
think about it. Most people, yeah, and again, that's one of those things for entrepreneurs that is part of the DNA that goes into guys like you. Is you've got a passion for what you do. You love what you do, and you're able to see if other people are responding to it and things like that. And so,
Mhm.
you take, but it's still a leap. I mean, for gosh sakes,
Oh yeah.
uh, it's there's quite a few knife makers out there right now vying for that customer's pocket when he walks by
Yep.
the table. And
That's right.
whatever it takes that makes you a little different from everyone else, whether it's the personality of the guy behind the table or the knives or a combination of those, I think that's the key, is to be approachable and make a product that appeals to most people. Uh, you know, but at the same time, man, those you're in bed in that kind of between dream and awake state. You're going, man, I hope this works.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It's, yeah, because you can want people to like your stuff all you want to, and you think it's the coolest thing in the
Yeah.
world, but unless people are forking over the money, it ain't gonna last too long. So
Well, that's interesting you say that too, because you have to understand what I've always told knife makers that have asked me, like, Ernie, what should I do? What kind of knives, and just generic kind of stuff like that. I always tell them, look, here's the deal. When you look at art, there's art ranges from one end of the spectrum to the other, and I'm talking about paintings and stuff like that. This artists and that. And some stuff to me looks like, oh my God, I can't believe someone actually even did something like that.
mhm.
All the way over to, Michelangelo and Da Vinci and all of those good guys. Uh, but there's somebody for every one of those pieces of art. So I
Yep.
always tell people, look, make what's in your heart. Make what
Yep.
you want to make, because there's going to be somebody out there that's going to walk by and they're going to go, damn, that's exactly the knife that I want. That's exactly what I was thinking about. And, again, and then it's just a matter of, you know, expressing yourself in that kind of genre or that style. And then kind of knowing also, and I always use this analogy, it's kind of dumb, but it kind of makes sense. I could be the best shoemaker on the planet Earth and make the best shoe that ever existed in history. But if I only made size 28 shoes, I'm not going to sell too many of
Right.
them. So you've got to make something that you know or you believe is going to appeal to quite a range of people. And, I was lucky in my regard because we had uh, a lot of action going on in the world when I kind of started the company, military action and all of that stuff. So, there were a lot of guys that in the service that needed knives, and there were a lot of police officers that were involved in a lot of stuff too. And I kind of just hit the wave at the right moment, and off it went. So, I was making knives that had enough of an appeal to enough people to support a business. And, I knew we weren't going to be Buck or Gerber or Spartaco even, but I needed to just kind of define to myself who I wanted to be, where I wanted to be, and how big the company wanted to be. So I kind of let it self grow. And then we reached a kind of a medium sized business. And it was something that I could still control, and I'm not a control freak by any stretch. I'm a delegator. I'd rather delegate and train somebody than do a lot of the things myself.
Mm.
But at that point, I said, let's have a company. Maybe we'll have 25 or 30 people down the road, and we can be agile, and we're made here in America. That was my goal from the very, very beginning of anything, way before it became a trend to, have stuff made here. My dream fantasy was to go back to my hometown and put all my buddies to work for me,
Yeah.
give them a good job.
Yeah.
So it was 100% made in America. And I didn't do that because we ended up putting some roots down here in California with the family
Right.
and everything else. But I wanted people that I would have as friends that would work for me. And so that was part of the whole plan for us to do it. And lo and behold, kind of came true. So
Yeah. So you kind of and this has been a question I maybe not struggled with, but I've thought about a lot lately because we're still a growing company, and
mhm.
I've kind of wondered. I'm like, okay, I want to set a lofty goal, but at the same time, I'm like, I also realize that to grow a company to a certain size, like say a Benchmade or a Spyderco, you, at least to this point in time, it seems like pretty much everybody that's done that, you have to adjust what you're making, like the price point you're making stuff at. Like, in other words, like, I mean, we're, our most popular model right now is like a little over $600. I'm probably not going to grow a company making $600 model, to a Benchmade size. I don't think could be wrong, but I don't feel like there's enough of a customer base out there for, to sell. Of course, obviously you don't have to sell as many if you're selling them for
Yep.
for more money too. So you can see where I'm like, I don't know where to set.
Yeah.
Like you seem like you had an idea of like, okay, I want to grow to this certain size because I know I can manage it and control it, and it'll be what I want it to be. And that's been something that I've kind of been thinking a lot about. Of like, I know I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet, but I'm still kind of struggling to say, and even to relay to my guys, because I want to tell them a vision of where we're going, right? And I don't know if I want to paint the picture that like we're going to be the biggest knife company in the world, or we're going to be the biggest in our genre. We're going to be, I've kind of struggled with being able to put my finger on exactly where I want us to get to, partly because we're building the damn airplane as we're flying along here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as I'm sure you did, and pretty much every other entrepreneur out there, you jump and you start building the airplane on the way down, So I don't really know, but that's really cool to hear you say that you kind of had, you put some thought into it. Obviously, you knew that were small enough to stay agile, make changes when you need to. You could still, be in control. It doesn't,
Mhm.
because again, you get to a certain point, then typically, at least, the founder, the owner, doesn't necessarily stay as they're at least not fully in charge. Like they end up hiring a CEO, they different things, and a lot of times they seem like if they're not careful, the company can start in a direction that they didn't necessarily plan on, because it kind of just becomes this whole monster that's, you know,
Too big to turn.
really really easy to get out of control of your original vision. So that's actually pretty refreshing to hear you say that.
Well, I'm writing down some notes as you're talking.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I will say to anyone starting a business or doing that. Now, this is just me, my opinion. You know,
Right.
and I've been known to be wrong, for sure. Is I never wanted to put my future in the hands of someone else, because no one on earth is going to protect your dream, your vision, your product, your quality or anything like that as viciously as you will yourself. And I
Right.
mean viciously. You have to. So, again, I've had guys ask me about that, starting companies and all that, and they want to go out and get investors and things like that. And that can work. That's a standard business operation. But when it comes to things that are unique creations, I think it's more in the interest of the company. If I mean, honest, there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I want to be bigger than Kershaw or whatever." That's great. That's a super aspiration. But at the same time, there's reality that comes in, and we looked at it and said, "You know what? I think we could sell our knives uh, in the amount and quantity that we want to produce, and live a comfortable life." And it's funny because I was born and raised in a log cabin that was built by my grandfather. This is no bullshit. It cost him $42 to build it, and that was mainly for some electrical plugs and some doorknobs. It was a 20 by 30-foot cabin. I slept in the kitchen because my brother and my sister each had their own bedrooms. And so, we were never poor. Don't get me wrong. We always had food and everything, but it was pretty meager life to start with. And I think that put in me the fact that I'm not looking for the fame and the fortune kind of thing. That any that I have, whatever small portion of that came my way, it came my way. So I wasn't out there trying to, I guess, create something as much as planting something in the ground and seeing how tall it's going to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you're funny when you mentioned the $600 knife. You know what? There's a lot of people that buy knives at that price. So that's nothing we've ever been scared of, because I remember one of the notes I wrote here was when I was at Benchmade, and I had a model called the CQC7, which was the one that I wanted to have them make, if you will. Les said, "Well, I think we could put that on the market for about $149. And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, it's going to be tough to sell a knife over $100. And I go, "Yeah, I know it's going to be tough to sell a knife." No, excuse me. Let me back up. He said we could probably sell that for like $99 or something like that. And I said, "Well, I want to sell it for $150." And he said, "Ernie, you're not going to sell any knives. No one's going to spend $150 for a pocket knife." And I said, "Man, Les, I think they will." And at that point, having come from the custom knife making point of view, people were spending a lot more than $100 for a knife to custom makers. And I thought, you know what, that precedent has already been set by all the custom knife makers are out there. And again, at that time, I think Michael Walker was probably one of the guys who was getting the most bang for his buck, so to speak. And his knives were selling for $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a piece. And so, I said, "Les, it's either got to be $150 or I walk out the door." And he goes, "No, man, we can't do it." And I said, "Well, then, I'll see you later." Because, that's, and again, that wasn't me being hardliner or some, stubborn negotiator or anything like that. It was like, I'm not going to do that unless we raise that bar of the price, because I knew who we were looking at, and it was not unusual, or it was probably the norm more than unusual. Uh, a guy goes out and spends five, six, seven, $800, $900 for a gun, and then spends $39 for a knife. That's the only thing they had. That was the only knife they had to buy. It
Right.
was either a Spyderco or something you buy at a hardware store or something, or something that was, in the display case at the gun store. And I said, I don't think they're going to have a problem with spending $150 for a knife to go with their gun. And so when we started our company, I mean, it came out. I think it came out about $149 or something like that for the original CQC7 from Benchmade. When we started our company, I started out. Our price was $229 for a knife. That was it.
Mhm.
And that, at the time when we started that tactical knife company, Emerson Knives Inc., that was the most expensive production knife that there was.
Oh, wow.
And I had a lot of people say, "Man, you're pricing them way too high and all this and that." I said, I don't think so. I'm going to be happy with the few amount that we sell, or whatever number that we sell. But uh, it was really and it actually was an educational process to the consumers. Uh, and I was very lucky too, because I was teaching all these classes and stuff, and we started doing some civilian classes. And a gentleman named Cameron Hopkins, who was the editor of Guns magazine and American Firearms, I think, he came to one of the classes, and we got talking, and he said, "Ernie, I want to run an article on you." And we were actually the first knife, real knife article in a gun magazine. Now, let me qualify that. In the past, in other gun magazines, Rifleman, whatever they happen to be, there might be a sidebar
Right.
about Gentleman Joe, who builds nice hunting knives and stuff, but it would be a sidebar down the side of a column on a page. Or they might mention Bo Randall or somebody like that. But there was never a full on, and it was like a 5-page full color
Wow.
article about Emerson Knives and Emerson training and all this and that. And that really, honest to gosh, that introduced the high dollar uh, production knife to the gun community.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where I just happened to be at the right place in the right time. And lo and behold, within the next couple of years, every knife company that there was started bumping all their prices up. And then because we broke that ceiling.
Yep.
And but you know, I've never been bashful about that. And as kind of a broken-hearted guitar player, I build custom electric guitars. And one of the guys in that world was a guy named Paul Reed Smith. And you can buy Gibsons and Fenders and all of the other electric guitars that are out there. Uh, but Paul Reed Smith said, "I want to build a custom production guitar that you can go into a store or wherever, pick it up, and step right out on stage and start playing it." Because the the real fine guitar players, the guys that are the real professionals, when they buy a guitar, they have to go through what they call a setup process, which is everything has to be. It's like tuning up a revolver that you buy, or a 1911 or something like that. Having a custom gunsmith go through it and dehorn it and polish and port and all that, all of the other things you have to do, put custom grips on it, all that kind of stuff. You have to do that with a guitar also to make it playable, because they make a guitar, companies that are in high production, they make a guitar that's kind of a generic setup, if you will, the height of the frets and the straightness of the fingerboard, and how it's, the intonation and everything. Everything's got to be adjusted from that if you're a real musician who knows that instrument. And he said, "I want to build that so that we can avoid all of that stuff and I'm going to charge a heck of a lot of money for those guitars. Well, lo and behold, Carlos Santana picks up one of his guitars, and boom, Paul Reed Smith became the boutique guitar manufacturer in the world. And he's
Wow.
still going strong, and he's really a good guy. But I use the guitar industry actually kind of as a model for a lot of stuff. Both the production, the big names are Fender and Gibson, of course. But I use their kind of business model along with Paul Reed Smith, and I said I want a boutique knife company. I don't want to have make 10,000 knives a month or something like that. I want to make knives that a guy can pick up and go, damn man, that this feels like it was built for my hand. And so that's another part of where we were going and why I didn't want to get big. Uh, and so I guess from that point of view, I am kind of a good control freak, but that's where we wanted to go, and that's kind of where we ended up. So I always look at ourselves as like a boutique, a boutique knife company,
Right.
A la Paul Reed Smith boutique guitar company,
Right.
and so that's where we felt comfortable.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think boutique is one of the words I used a couple of podcasts ago. We had some questions. People were trying to get some delineation of, custom versus mid-tech versus production, small batch production, whatever. We kind of went through that whole spiel, and that was kind of the way I described, companies like we're on the small end of that, but companies like us, up to you, Hinder, Strider, all those guys are, like what I would consider, just like you said, a boutique company that's, definitely production, but it's not, like you said, it's not large scale like a Benchmade or a, whatever. So Kershaw and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's tough. It takes a long time to turn an aircraft carrier around, but a little speedboat, you can turn on a dime.
Yeah. I can definitely see advantages to that of, kind of keeping an eye on the market and being able to shift and do things a lot quicker and, and be more nimble with it. I definitely see advantages to that for sure. So you're kind of the embodiment of something I feel like is really rare in our industry. Well, any industry that involves just like you're talking about the guitar stuff. And which is something I've mentioned you as an influence a bunch of times, and it was always not that I don't love your knives, but it's always been the business side of things, and how you've grown your business, because I feel like it's really rare. Most people that have that left brain creative side, usually that doesn't mesh well with also having the right brain, business minded stuff either. I feel like it's really rare to find somebody that's really creative and good at it, but also good on the business side of it, and being able to turn that into an actual good business. Like there are tons of fantastic knife makers out there, but seems like only a small handful that actually have turned that into a good, successful business that has stood the test of time. And so there's not that many people to look to. I don't feel like in our industry. It seems like a small handful.
It is, and I'm not going to take credit for that, but thank you for the compliment. But my wife, I might be the creative guy, but my wife is really the driver for a lot of those decisions that actually made the business what it is. So maybe I got a little bit of business sense, but my wife really had the business sense. She has horse sense, if you want to say that. I'm more like, hey man, I'm jumping in. I don't care what the temp of the water is. Ooh man, it's freezing. I shouldn't have done that.
That's what he's sitting here saying. That sounds familiar. That sounds very familiar to both of us. That's I would have crashed and burned a long time ago if it hadn't been for her. She's definitely I forget what the name of the book is, but I read a book a while back, a business book talking about how, most companies are started by a visionary type person. And then that if that's who you are, you need to, as quickly as possible, find somebody that's a good fit. That's I forget what they called them, but it's basically the operator, that knows how to operate the business. And I've said many times that I got extremely lucky that basically I did this, and I just happened to be married to the operator. Like she's really good at all of that side of it, and tempers me a lot with maybe we don't need to buy 3 new machines just yet. Let's back it off a little bit.
I
So,
got you. You could have the fastest horse in the world, but if the rider wasn't a good rider, he ain't going to win any races.
that's right.
So
Yep,
it's that
that's a good
combination.
analogy. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. That's I thoroughly believe that, and it's not always, like I said, it's not always the wife. A lot of times it is. Sometimes people actually find, a second in command that can
Yeah.
be really
Yeah.
good. But I feel like if you're lucky enough to be able to have it inside the family, that's even better. Like
Yeah.
that's
Well, we're that. We were lucky. And because my wife is the business part of everything, she signs all the checks. And I remember her also saying to me, she goes, Ernie, we're never, ever going to let anybody sign the checks but us, meaning her, me, so to
right,
speak.
right.
And I said, you know what, I'm okay with that because coming from a long association with boxing and things like that, I knew a lot of the stories of all the different boxers. They had accountants and people that signed their checks, and they ended up with nothing after
Yeah,
getting the hell beat out of them for 25 years. But the other thing about that family was, you know, again, my family grew up in the knife making arena because the with me going to custom shows and dragging the family along with me, they were literally, my 2 daughters were under the table and they'd untie people's shoelaces and stuff when they were, I mean, honest to gosh,
yeah,
and then, so they grew up in it. And then my son came along a few years later and he grew up in it too. And they just kind of, I never uh, pushed them to work for us. I figured they would either have their own interests that they would develop, which they all have. They all, whether it's horses or health is my middle daughter is just getting her degree in naturopathic health services or something like that. I don't even know what the name of it is, but uh, and so they all decided that they wanted to work for us at some point. I didn't even have to ask them; they just kind of grew into it. And so my daughter Megan, the oldest one, she runs all the marketing. My middle daughter Rachel, who has a first degree, was in business operations, and she's director of operations for the company. And now my son is taking over with all the programming and the nuts and bolts that happen in the factory in the back. And but one thing too I forgot to mention is almost forgot was now he's a knife maker and is making his own custom knives and has got had quite a bit of success in doing so and all that. And it's funny because I remember uh, he came to me one day. This was about 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, "Dad, I want to be a knife maker." And I was like, "Really, you do, huh? Are you sure you want to do that?" Trying to stay a little calm because inside I was going, "Yes." But my point being is that I never wanted to push him because, like, you guys understand this. If you want to be a knife maker, it's because you want to be a knife maker.
yeah,
That's what you want to do. And it's got to be that solid of a foundation inside you, because if you don't enjoy doing it, then you shouldn't be doing it.
no,
And it's. I remember Michael Walker said to me one time. He said, "Ernie, if you don't want to make your 1,000th knife, don't make your first knife." And it's very interesting. It's very simple and it's kind of cliche, but it's like, man, he was right because
yeah,
if I didn't like what I was doing this far into the game, I would be one miserable son of a gun. So when my son approached me to say that, it was like my prayers have been answered because uh, I didn't push him in any way, shape, or form. And I remember one of my buddies, he was a state high school wrestling champion, and he had one son, and that son was going to be a wrestler. And there was no way around it. He was going to wrestle, and he started taking him to wrestling camps and everything else when he was like 4 or 5 years old, 6, 7, 8. Got him on the junior high wrestling teams, all of that stuff. And when the kid turned to be about 13, and is it okay to swear? Because I got to put this in.
Absolutely.
Okay. He turned to his dad. My friend's name is Ken, and he said, "Dad, I fucking hate wrestling." And it broke my friend's heart. It broke him. And I was like, "Oh boy, I got that. I understand it. I wanted my boy to play baseball. He chose soccer. I wanted my son to be a knife maker, and he wasn't really going there. And all of a sudden, boom, he comes to me with it. That's when you know that seed or whatever is self-planted, and they're going to tend to it. So that's another one of those things that I tell knife makers, that are guys that are, when they talk about business, even, let's say, I want to start a small production company or whatever, I always tell them, I said, look, you got to understand something. The first thing you got to understand is you're never off the clock, ever. You're never off the clock. You don't get to punch out and go home and have a good weekend. And when that phone rings at 3, 4 in the morning because something's happening at the shop, that's an alarm, or a mouse ran in front of the alarm, you're the one who has to get up and drive down there and do all of that. So it's also one of those things that's why I say you got to love it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're jumping into deep water, and you better either teach yourself how to swim right away, or you better already know how to swim before you jump in. But it's that you can't do it just on passion. It's a hell of a lot of sacrifice. I'll be real frank with you. It took a lot of time away from my family. That was just maybe time that we should have been sitting around watching a Christmas movie or something like that. But I'm out in the garage grinding blades or whatever. But I tried to temper it as best I could. But it's, again, one of those things where it's, if you want to do it, if you really want to do it, because here's the deal: a lot of guys that you see as knife makers, and they make, honest to gosh, they make knives that are like a million times better than any knife that I've ever made. But a lot of them already have another job. Right. So if they want to take 2 months to build a knife and do intricate engraving and all kinds of fancy Dan stuff on it, that's fine. I have that's part of the entire custom knife making field. But you can't look at one of those guys and say, well, I want to do that and make a living at it. You've got to look at, this is everything that I'm going to do has got to go into me making a living for it. And then if you get to the point where you have employees and things like that, you are also responsible for their well-being. Yeah. You're paying their mortgage, and you're putting food on their table, and you're putting their child through college. And that's a hell of a responsibility, because if I got frustrated and said, to hell with it, I'm not going to work for a week, screw that, I'm tired, I'm sick and tired, everything, that machine broke, and then the toilet overflowed and all that kind of stuff. Geez, I don't want to deal with that anymore. Well, I can't do that. I cannot do that. And I'm bound by a moral obligation and a business obligation to both my family and my employees, because I've got to be the responsible adult in that equation, because now they have put their future, so to speak, into my hands, into my vision and my I guess shepherding of what happens to them. So it's not just, I think I can do this. And it's funny because I always tell my wife, damn, I want to have a restaurant or a bar. That would be so. But then I talk to people that have one, and they're like, oh my God. Yeah, you can make a lot of money with a nice restaurant or a bar, but it's the same thing. You hear those stories about, I can't get good people. This guy was stealing from me. So-and-so, the refrigerator broke and cost me $20,000 to get a new one. I was like, okay, I got it. I
learned enough. Ready to be all in.
Yeah, all in. That's the key. So I'm all in with the knives and everything, but it's probably not quite as complicated as running a restaurant. So I'm good with that.
I think it's just different complications. Some of the guys running restaurants would probably blow their mind if they started dealing with figuring out how to maintain tolerances and that kind of stuff like
Oh
you're
yeah,
doing. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. And like, it's interesting for me to see where he's at, because I was his first employee outside of the
Mhm.
family. Like, his son and his daughter had worked for him a little
Yep,
bit here
yep.
and there, but I was the first hire outside. And so, like, I kind of got to, watch this whole transition happen. And then eventually I left and went full time on my own. And,
Uh-huh.
I'm doing full handmade stuff now and trying to get to kind of
It's
where
that
you
labor.
guys are. So it's the thing is starting over. The clock has rolled around again, and I'm trying to climb that mountain too. But
Well,
sorry.
I was going to say will beats skill
Yeah,
every single time, because you
Yeah.
can learn the skills, but you got to have the will. And it's obvious just listening to you that you knew that you could do it, and that is the key too. Is you got to have an unshakable drive and will that you're going to make it happen. I remember a quote from Hannibal. He said when he was faced with the Italian Alps, trying to come down from the north into Italy to attack attack Rome,
yeah,
he said, if I can't find a way, I'll make a way.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, he did. He
that's
Yeah.
drug the army all the way across the Alps in
Yeah.
midwinter.
Yep.
So, if you don't have that kind of will and drive and determination, it's going to
Don't
be a
even
real
start.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to
Just
be
don't
you're
start if
starting
you
with
aren't willing
yeah.
to give up basically everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sacrifices, but you get also to the point where you can ease up on the throttle a little bit, uh, because if you're at all a good judge of character, you can find some good people. And I always look at, when we hire people, it's funny because being in a manufacturing environment and coming out of a manufacturing environment, so to speak, when I was working, we've all had dozens of different jobs in our lifetime before we got to where we're at. I was a student of all, you know human nature and personality types and all that. And it was one of those things where, as an athlete, when I was in school and everything, um, and again, it sounds so braggadocious, but it's all real. I was a 4-year, 4-letter athlete when I was in high school, and I got a football scholarship to go to the University of Wisconsin and La Crosse, which was the name of the city. And then I ended up playing semi-pro baseball and all that. But I was around a lot of coaches, and I did a lot of coaching in my life. And being from northern Wisconsin, I grew up under the shadow of Vince Lombardi, and then there was Tom Landry from the Cowboys and stuff like that. Those kind of individuals, they did something that was a little different than what a normal coach would do, where you're looking for an athlete with superior skills and things like that. And we used it with SEAL Team 6, actually, that when I was involved with some of the stuff that was going on, is you are looking for a person with good morals. You're looking for a good person,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to create a good person. Because if you create a good athlete, a good person, if you create a good person, you will create a good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Lombardi did was he wanted to create better men. That was his goal. And by creating better men, he got a better team.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's, I guess, another kind of a little thing to think of is also, when guys have asked me when I was coaching and all that, like, who's the best player on the team, and it's always the guy that is the high scorer, whether it's basketball or soccer or anything else or wrestling or whatever. And I always tell them, no, you know what? It's not that guy. The best player on the team is the best team player,
Yeah.
period. Because that person who's the sharpshooter, he couldn't exist on that court or in that field without the support of that team effort and those team players. And so, when you look at people that you're going to have that you are going to work for you and you're allowing them to have a piece of that, your dream, if you will, is I always look for people. I don't care if the guy's never doesn't know an on switch from a light switch on a machine. If they're a good person, I can teach them.
Yeah.
I can teach them the skills that they need, but I can't teach character. I cannot teach someone to be honest, to be forthright, to have a work ethic and things like that. I can coach them in certain regards to make that happen and give them the opportunities. It's like my mom always told me. She said, "Ernie, you give people opportunity, they're going to step up. They will generally always step up because you've had faith in them and they don't want to let you down." Now, that's not always the case. We've had some clinkers down the road, like we've all known a few clinkers in our lives also. But you do have to have that ability also to read people and say, I think this is a good girl or a good guy or whatever, and then you welcome them into the family or the community. And so it's partly that, because you're those people, they then they become the people who actually pay your mortgage and put the food on your table.
Yep.
So there's got to be a huge amount of respect, and there has to be a huge amount of realizing that my name may be on the marquee, but it's those people in the shop that are keeping the lights on my name.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
That's something a lot of people don't grasp that, or at least they don't engage that. And so, it's if I had 200 employees, I might not be able to be quite that personally involved in everyone. But by keeping it small, we have a real good family of employees, and
Right.
a lot of them have been with us. Some of them have been with us since the day we opened the door on the company.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and I've got a little funny story I want to tell you.
All right.
When we first started, we didn't have a company. We didn't have all the machinery. I had some small tabletop, the old Grizzly or whatever, central machinery, tabletop hand mill, and a small lathe and a bunch of grinders and small little saws, anything I could fit into my little tiny garage, right? So we didn't have a factory. So we had some of our parts. In fact, most of the parts we outsourced to different vendors like heat treating, and we found a guy who had a water jet that could cut the blades out and all of that good stuff. But I did all the grinding and everything. Well, eventually, because we needed to make a couple hundred knives at a time, I literally had to find a place that was all the way up in Colorado, almost 2,000 miles away. We had to ship knives back and forth to get them ground. So that was a logistical nightmare, as it were. But all of the other kind of work on the handles and everything I did in the garage. But we had a need for people to assemble the knives, which we assembled in our living room on fold out picnic tables. And we had a friend who was he was a bishop in the Mormon church, and their sons and daughters became real good friends with my sons and daughters, because they were just down the street from us. So they kind of grew up together, and we knew each other really well. And his name was Mike. I went to him one time and I said, "Mike, I know that your church has a really strong support group for all the people in your church and community that need help and all that. Do you have any ladies that might need jobs that just can't get a 9-to-5 job because they've got babies or they've got kids in school or this school and that school and everything, that can't go in and punch a time clock?" And he said, yes, we do. And so I said, well, send them our way, and we'll have them. They can show up at any time they want. They can come in and start assembling knives. Well, every morning, we lived in a small community at that time. Every morning, 4 or 5 women would show up at my house, and they'd be standing outside, and we'd open the door and they'd all come in. And I always wondered, no one ever said anything, but I always wondered, what do the neighbors think is going on inside my house? Yeah. A bunch of Mormon ladies putting knives in. I don't think that came to mind.
Yeah.
But we did everything.
They thought you needed a whole lot of evangelizing
Yeah,
there at his house
right.
every day. He needs a lot of
Yeah.
help.
Oh,
Oh,
Oh man. But
that's
anyway,
funny. That was some
just it's
outside the box thinking, though.
yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
well. I had a friend that was in the Marines, and he told me one time. He said, "Ernie, I had a lawn mowing company, and I started getting a few customers." And he was a gunnery sergeant, and he said, I started getting a few customers, and I wanted to continue this, but was getting out of hand. And he said, man, all of a sudden I thought, all my Marines picking up some extra money on the weekend and stuff,
Oh yeah,
mowing lawns. He said, man, we went from zero to hero in a heartbeat because they don't get paid
yeah. No,
near enough, not near enough. And so he said, I had all these guys, and man, they were going lickety split. You can imagine a bunch of young Marines mowing a
mm-hmm.
lawn. They were running with the lawnmower, go
Yep,
get it done so they could get to the next job and get that
yep,
done. So, you do take advantage of those kind of things.
yeah. Absolutely.
You got to see it. You got to look at it and go, okay, what do I do here? Let's solve this problem. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
kind of come up with,
and that's outside the box. A lot of times is the best way.
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
So, one thing we wanted to ask, as far as like, since you've been doing this for a while, is what are the changes you've seen, or the biggest changes you've seen in the industry, sort of in the last decade or so, as far as how it looks from your end, and how you
Yeah.
think the market's changing.
Well, I'll start back with, when I started as a machinist, actually, was in the time period back in the 70s when NC machines were $1 million a piece, and uh, no one really knew too much about them. And are they good? Are they bad? Or whatever. But being working at that company, Hughes Aircraft, uh, they had brought those into the fold for manufacturing consistent and high tolerance parts and all that. But the average machinist and the average knife maker at that time had basically a drill press and some kind of grinder, a belt grinder, and maybe a surface grinder. And that was about the long and the short of it.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw was that gradually, over the years, gradually go from not existing in the knife making community, not even in the factories, because I went to Japan. The Japanese government invited me to go over in early, just actually in 2001, I think it was, to help them kind of sort out the knife manufacturing industry over in Japan, which sounds high and lofty. And I thought, wow, they're asking me to do this. This is very cool. I'm really honored. And I went over, and in Japan, which was literally, quite literally, the knife making capital of the world,
Mm-hmm.
period. Every single knife that was made basically came from Seiki City, Japan. And, there was Solingen, there was Sheffield, and a few other places. There was the upstate New York, where we had our knife making factories and stuff. But Seiki made them for everybody, and by the thousands, by the millions, actually. And when I first got over there, they brought me over. There's a guy named Sakai, George Sakai, uh, or Yuhei Sakai, and they brought me over and took me on a tour. The city of Seiki, it's very interesting. It only exists because of knife making.
Hmm.
And as we were driving through the city, it was funny because I was like, that guy's got a burger grinder in his garage. That guy's pulling stuff out of a heat treating oven, and that guy's grinding something. And then every single garage had a portion of the knife making process in their at their home.
Yeah.
And then they had all these little kind of almost like golf carts, but stepped up a little bit. They would travel throughout the city picking up parts and all that, and then bring them over to the main factory where they were eventually assembled and all that. But I walked into the main factory and I was like, holy crap. I thought I was going to walk into like a Toyota manufacturing where there were robots and
Yeah.
welding sparks going all over and everything, and there's only one guy sitting in a booth who's directing. No, man, I walked in and there were rows of people sitting on the floor or lying down on the floor, buffing parts out, grinding little pieces here and there to fit because most of the stuff was put together with the rivets at that time, lockbacks and all that good stuff. There were hundreds of people, and it was like, holy moly, this is like a time machine. Yeah. And there were no NC machines. There was none of that going on. And I was like, damn, what is going on here? Well, there's another thing that happens, and this is important to know as an owner of a production facility. You will run into this, again, human nature. That's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
There is a heavy reluctance to change, and it's not because people are being stubborn or anything, but that's the way I was taught. That's the way I'm doing it. That's the way we do it. That's the way the future generations are going to do it. And the thing about Seiki City in Japan, the reason it was the knife making center was it goes all the way back to the samurai, to the swordsmiths. And the reason is there was a conflux of a bunch of rivers right there in the Seiki City that had the highest iron ore and the most pure iron ore, black sand in the country. So all of the great swordsmiths came from that particular area. Masumune and all of the ones that we know historically as some of the greatest swordsmiths that ever lived. And so it started 1,000+ years ago, and that's the way we always did it. And it's still that generational higher, what do you call it? The habit,
knowledge, and
those habits came all the way up to the future. And I remember talking to Yuhei's brother, who was in charge of all the operations. I said, come on. I said, the first thing you got to do is you got to buy a laser. I said, here, I have in my knife factory in the United States, I have a Mitsubishi laser. And here I am in Japan, where Mitsubishi builds the lasers, and you guys don't have one. I said, I don't understand this. You guys have to get a laser. So their first big machine that they bought was a Mitsubishi laser.
Wow.
And then they started buying up I said, you have to have NC mills and a lot of that good stuff, lathes and all that to make your parts. You can make them so you don't have to grind everything together to make it fit. You can put parts together. I said, you have to look at it like you're building a firearm. And I said, the firearm that I have the most experience with in that regard, which is a whole nother little story, but is if you look at the 1911, it's a compendium of parts that all fit together that become a gun. And I said, you have to look at it like that. If they can make all these parts that go into a gun, you can make all the parts that go into making a knife. And you don't have to do them by hand. And you don't have to have people sitting on the floor blending rivets in so that it's all flush and all that. You can actually build those tolerances and everything. So we had a good relationship and had fun with all this and that. But that went back to your original question. What have I seen that has changed? Mills and lathes and stuff like that. You could buy a used manual mill for maybe $1,500, actually, a good Bridgeport, because there was a million of them. They were like the Chevy, 327 or 283 engine. They've been around for 1,000,000 years, and they're still. I mean, I've got mills out here that were probably built in the 1940s or 50s that we use every day. And if you treat them well, they'll stay well. And so what I've seen over the years was, and it's funny because you bring that up, because I remember being I'm not a guild member, but I was for a while. I remember the heated arguments in the meetings about he uses a mill to cut his handles out or whatever. That's not a handmade knife. And there was this huge, I remember one guy said, well, what's he supposed to do? Get on a bicycle and run his grinder with his foot pedal? Does that qualify as a handmade knife? And it was right at that time when knife makers were starting to buy some of their own equipment beyond a drill press and a grinder. So they were buying, mills. They were buying lathes and things like that, and putting those into production because you could make a much more precise part. Uh, and you could do it consistently over time. You would be able to take a knife model and say, I don't want to make one of a kind creations. I want to make 30 of those creations all at the same time in a process. And the only way that you can do that is to have some kind of machinery that you use to make those piece parts. And they may be roughed out and still need to be all completely hand ground and everything to fit together uh, in the end. But you're going to get a lot of more, you're going to start out at the 50-yard line rather than at the 0-yard line of that 100-yard dash by doing that. And then at that time, you couldn't buy an NC mill. They were still 250,000. They came down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they came down to 100,000. And they came down to, fast forward to kind of where we're at today, you can buy an NC mill for under $10,000. Or you can retrofit a mill with NC servo motors and things like that if you want. But you don't even have to do that anymore because you can buy a real decent little NC mill that you could actually put in your garage that'll make parts for you for under $10,000. So that what I've seen in the way that the industry has evolved has been the introduction of those kinds of processes into the production arena. Now, granted, that happened in the curve probably 10 years before it happened in the custom knife making community, because a company like Gerber or Buck or somebody, they have $150,000 to go buy
Right.
a mill, and then they have the money to go buy 20 of them, and they have the money to go, to invest in all that.
Right.
The average custom knife maker or the small production guy who has a dream to become a small production facility, that's to make 150,000. That takes a long damn time to have that kind of cash available.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's you can lease equipment, the rates and you don't have to put giant down payments down. So it just became easier and easier and easier for guys to fold those into smaller operations that don't have, we got a $10 million R&D budget that we need to spend this year. We don't have that. You don't have that. I don't think. Most guys don't have that. But it became affordable for people to have access to those kinds of things. And also, a guy who has some of that may exceed the capacity that he's using it for. So people were willing to say, hey, man, you want handles? I can make handles for you. Just get me all the specs and the blueprints and all that. And so that also became kind of within our community, because the knife makers, I've never seen it as a competition between this knife company and that company, or this knife maker and that company or anything. To me, it was all, we're all doing this. The tide will raise all of these boats. So when somebody had a huge smashing success with a new lock mechanism or a new type of material that they kind of pioneered bringing into the industry, I never really looked at it and said, damn, I wish I would have done that. Maybe a little, but it's like, good on you, because that's gonna bring everybody up. Because if we can create excitement in the industry and in the customers, the consumers, the people that like knives, they're going to eventually make their way over to my company or your company or to this knife maker's table, because it's like that. You could have the best baseball team in the world, but if you're the only baseball team that exists, who do you play? There's no competition to have fun with and to test your skills. So. Again, it's been that kind of thing, but that again, back to your question, it's been the introduction of the CNC computer controlled machines that have raised the bar for precision, for consistency, for exotic materials. I mean, try cutting a piece of Inconel with a A milling machine.
Yeah.
It's a bitch. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not using Inconel for anything, but as a machinist, that was one of the really tough materials that we had
Yeah.
to use once in a while. I was like, oh God, I don't want to make this part. But anyway, now if you put it on an NC, you adjust the speeds and feeds, the right coolant, use the right tools, and you just push a button and it can do that. So that's why we've got full titanium handles that are sculpted and scalloped and all of those good things.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the knives. Look at the knives that you could only buy at the hardware store 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now go to the hardware store and there's even a knife in there that's still $69, $79. And it might have a titanium handle or
Right.
at least got an aluminum handle that's all sculpted and machined and all that. So yeah, that's part of the evolution. I welcome it. I enjoy it. It's not necessarily what I'm going to do, because I'm kind of stuck in my ways, if you will, old dog, but, it's exciting to see that. And I think there's room. You mentioned, I hope I have people that are going to, want to spend money for a $600 knife. That's the other thing that's happened. People they're out there, and I have extreme faith in the United States economy. I have extreme faith. I know it in my heart that we're headed for a golden resurgence of American manufacturing. I know that at some point we're going to have the highest production and the least amount of unemployment in the world for a country. There's going to be a golden age where they're going to buy knives. You can bet the prices are going to go up even higher than that for what people are going to pay. So that again is, God help me if I'm wrong, but or God help us all if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we've got bigger problems if you're wrong.
Yeah. I think there's a golden age ahead of us, and I think people are they want good quality, they want American-made product, and they're willing to pay for it. And there's addressing the $600 price point that you mentioned, that's not going to be an issue. Those people, they know quality, they know what they're getting. As long as, I talked to Bo Randall one time, and he told me, he said, because when I was first started, we had a mutual friend who introduced me to him. And I said, what kind of advice can you give me? He goes, only make a good quality product for a reasonable price and you'll never go wrong. And that's a fact. Now, the reasonable price has gone up. And it will continue to go up because, like everything else, you could buy a TV. Well, that's a bad analogy because now you can buy a TV for a couple $100. It's an 80-inch wide.
Well, but as you said, the technology has advanced too, and customers realize that. Like, it's not like the prices have gone up while the knives and the technology and everything has stayed the same. Like everything that we're doing is more advanced, more technical. Technically arguably a better quality product, depending on how you look at it. But definitely more technical products. So. And that's where it kind of comes in to be our job too, to educate the customers as we go, so 100%. That they understand why it costs $600 or whatever. Like the more they know, we're really big on showing behind the scenes stuff in the shop and all that. So like these guys understand. We talk about it a ton on the podcast that breaking down stuff like all the different expenses that nobody thinks about that come with running a company and stuff like that. It's like people don't even come close to scratching the surface of understanding what all goes into, just the cost of keeping the lights on and keeping this machine going, the business. But I want to steer us down a rabbit hole that I kind of anticipated that this might be part of your answer to that question. And if I let you go long enough, it probably would have been. But another thing, you probably already know where I'm going. Another thing that I have seen, I haven't been in it as nearly as long as you, but I've been in it long enough to see over the last, I'd say, decade, 10 to 12 years, we went from pretty much anybody that brought a knife out that was being made in China, it was essentially laughed at, like it was a joke. And to now, it's honestly maybe the norm, if not more than the norm. Like it's become just an accepted thing that they're made there. And I'm not talking the companies themselves and the people that are using those companies for OEM work. So that's one of the huge changes. The technical stuff, like you talked about, a million percent that's changed, but the landscape has changed a lot, and the barrier to entry has changed a lot to have and I say this loosely, a knife company or a knife brand now where people can, draw up a napkin drawing with no
Yeah.
even technical skills of how to make it work as a functioning knife. And a couple months later, 3-4 months later, whatever, they're selling them as
There it
their
is.
knife line. Like
Yeah.
that, in my opinion, has been a huge detriment to the industry. Like that's definitely headed in the wrong direction. So
You're willing to hear my opinion on this,
I
right?
want it. It's probably
Okay.
pretty similar to mine, I would guess.
First off, I have to state, for the record, uh, the average guy person in China is just a guy like you and me. The government slash Communist Party, which are all basically the same exact thing, no matter what
Right.
anybody tries to spin, and all the people that deal with on the high level in the government, they know this. All the Pentagon, now
Yep.
the War Department, knows that 100%. The Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party are enemies of the United States. They are 100% sworn enemies, and they're trying to take down the United States in every. If the United States is not like a poured concrete wall, the United States is a brick by brick built country where every single brick in that wall is important to us and to the prosperity and future of our country. But they're working on taking every single brick, whether it's industry or the fentanyl or everything, sowing seeds of discontent and bots and all the bullshit that they pull to try and keep us at odds with ourselves.
Yep.
And it's 100%. It's like unrelenting, doesn't stop, 24/7 all the time. Well, the knife industry is also one of the industries. They're trying to take the car. They wanted to take the car industry down. They still are after it. Everything that we basically brought to the table, they're trying to crush, kill, destroy to hurt us, hurt our will, hurt our patriotism, hurt our military industrial capabilities. And it's just across the board. And one of the things that they're doing in the knife industry is all of a sudden you've got a knife from China now, because I remember when they were shite knives. There was no.
Oh yeah.
They were
Right.
pieces of junk made with pretty much a tin blade, if you will. And so now you've got a knife that comes from China. It's $1,000, and it is freaking perfect.
Yep.
It is absolutely perfect. And it's made out of titanium, and it's got all this fancy stuff on it and all that. But one of the things that my son told me one time when we were down at a show in Nashville, and he was, having basically his first knives on the table kind of thing. And he was wandering around the show, and he came back to me and he goes, "Dad, there's some really nice knives here." And he knew my stance, both politically and ethically and everything else. He said, they're made in China. There's some of these companies, but they're really, really nice. And he said, but they don't have a soul. And I was like, Lucas, that's some profound stuff right there that you just said.
Yep.
They do not have a soul. And I said, son, those companies, one day they're making doorknobs, the next day they're making knives. They're not knife makers. They are not knife makers. They're making something to cancel out Gerber, Buck, Kershaw, you, me, all of us. And it's by design. There's no way around that. They want to own every industry, steel making, everything. And so the one thing that bothers me, and I saw this coming through in the last several years, is how can a knife company start from scratch, never heard of the name before, and you go to the Blade Show in Atlanta, and there are banners and posters and everything, and I know how much that costs. It's
It's a
hundred
lot. Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
$1,000 to put
Yeah.
that up. Do you know how long it took me to make $100,000? It took years,
Yep.
years and years. You can't go from we're going to have a knife company to not only having employees, having a company, having a factory, uh, making parts, buying raw material out of the blue, and still have hundreds of thousands of dollars left over to do advertising and promotion. That money came directly from the Communist Party
Being
because they're
subsidized.
subsidized.
Yep.
Yes. And you can't say they make a shite product anymore. They make a damn good product, but you can say, F you.
They do not play fair in any sense of the word.
No, they
Like,
do
matter
not.
of fact, it is exactly the opposite. Like, and the one thing, all these things you're talking about, they are totally willing, and not just willing, but actually, I think prefer to play the long game. Like, they are
Oh, yeah.
okay. They're totally fine with letting those factories operate at a loss. Which is why they can,
Oh, yeah.
they can sell the knives for what they're selling them for. We can't even. I mean, there's some of those knives they're making. We could barely, buy the materials and stuff for,
Yeah.
for that price. But yet they can do it, for one thing, because they're using slave labor, which for some reason now nobody wants to believe. Oh,
I
such,
know.
I won't name company names, but the more
I don't get
prominent
it.
companies, oh, they're not using slave labor. How do you
Yes, they
know? Have you
are.
ever been in their factory?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. And then,
Yes, they are.
but they're willing. The government is willing to let those factories operate at a loss, just simply so they can gain the market share and
Yeah.
take that brick out of the wall, like you were talking about.
Yep.
They know eventually if they do that
The
and they
wall's
put
going to
all of
fall.
us out of business, they got it. They can
Yeah.
jack the prices up. They have a monopoly, just like they do with electronics and everything else. And now they've got it, and they're totally willing. Their whole plan is the long game.
Yep.
But people are just so, ooh, sparkly new knives. That's a
Sparkling
couple
knives.
$100
Yep.
cheaper than
Well,
this one over
Yeah.
here. And
on that note, they come out with 6 new models every quarter.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're
On repeat.
super prolific. Just just shotgun blast. Just throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. And
Well, here's the other
unfortunately,
thing.
go
Here's
ahead.
something else that we're up against as a as a maker, as a person who owns a company, like you guys are talking about and do. Uh, I used to, I still do. It still galls me because we'll hear stuff like, "Oh, Emerson knives are so expensive. Screw that. Blah blah blah. I'm buying a knife from XYZT company or
Mhm.
this other company," and I can't get involved in that because it just looks like sour
Right.
grapes on my part. But
Right.
it's like, I'll tell you what, I've been to those places, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I get the offers all the time. I worked with some of the companies that get parts made overseas and all that. And I'll tell
Mhm.
you what, there was a time when you could buy knives by the pound,
Wow.
literally by the pound. You'd buy the boxes of their knives. They just sold them by the pound. Now, it's people say, like I said, Emerson knives are expensive and blah, blah, blah. And you do understand that company, or there's several of them, those companies are now, when I told you about we raised the bar for the pricing of knives,
Mm-hmm.
they're charging $250 to $300 to $350 a knife. And I'm making a knife and I'm charging $250, $300, whatever it happens to be. But I am paying American wages to American workers,
Yep.
giving them a decent living and doing all that. And those people that have those other companies, they're buying knives for $12.28 a piece. And they are charging you, the people that are bitching,
Yep.
the same price as they're charging, the same price that we're charging for the knives that we make right here in the United States, putting Americans to work.
Right.
and paying all the taxes and all the things that go into running a business or
Yep.
a hobby endeavor or an endeavor or a
Yep.
small business or whatever. And it used to really, it still does. It burns my ass because I'll tell you what, I'm telling you right now, I could have been a billionaire. I,
Oh
I
yeah.
could have,
If you're
I
willing to
could have
sell
been
out. Yeah.
ultra rich
Yep.
because we have the huge demand all over the world for our product. But I refused to go and buy a knife for $12 and then say, "Hey, Bob, that knife's $279,
Yep. Yep.
and it's a good knife."
Yep.
And that's not me. That never has been me. It never will be. It's not. I think it's a morally corrupt.
It is. It's a morally corrupt business model. It's
Yeah.
a,
And
and
yeah,
I've said it recently. Like it's people look at people, the American companies, wherever, and they complain, like just like you said, about prices. They call us greedy and everything else. Villainize us. If they had any idea, and I've talked about this on our. I mean, we don't have that many listeners, but
hmm,
I tried to explain to people how little profit margin we actually have. And
yeah,
these other guys that they're bitching about our prices and calling us greedy because we're charging three,
yeah,
four, five, $600 for a knife, but we're making a very small profit margin. And then, like you
yeah,
said, that money is basically 100% of it is going back into the American economy,
yeah.
and being used. All those people that we both employ are going out into the community. They're spending money
You're
in
spreading
the
the wealth. Yep.
community. They're buying products that were made in your community that were shipped to our community, so on and so forth. But then they take these other people, they're buying knives hand over fist from people that are making 300% profit
Oh
and
yeah,
calling us greedy. Like
yeah.
over here with a very small fraction of that, we're nowhere near a 300% profit. I know you're not either. But
No
somehow
sir.
we get villainized as the greedy ones when
Yeah,
it's like people are completely blind to it. They just think, oh, this is cheaper. So, and this one's charging this much, and this knife, like you said, the quality is there now.
true.
So they're like, okay, we got this quality and this quality. So this person charging more is the greedy one. When this person's making 300% margin and we're making a fraction of that, like
Yeah.
it blows my mind like that
I'm
people
going to tell
can't.
you a little. I'm going to tell you a little story about. And again, it sounds like I'm sour graping, but this shit is real.
It is.
Uh, there was one company that, and I knew their, I don't know what you call it, liaison to their manufacturing overseas. Uh, he told me, he goes, Ernie, he goes, we can really help you out. And I go, and how's that? He goes, well, he goes, so and so company, what they do is they're getting their blades made in China in most of their parts. And every product that comes into the United States has to have country of origin, which
Mm-hmm.
Eche in Mexico or made in Manila and made in the
Right.
Philippines or made in China, whatever. It has to be part of the the part.
Mm-hmm.
He said what they're doing is they're getting finished knives made in China. The knives are not sharp. They're dull. So they've got the land all the way out that's maybe 10, 15 thousandths or whatever. Well,
Mm-hmm.
right along that edge of the blade, the Chinese company is lasering made in China. And the letters are maybe less than 62 thousandths high. They're probably 40, 50 thousandths high, but it qualifies as to the laws and regulations of the U.S. Customs and all of that good stuff. Made in China, so they get a completely 100% made knife, made in China, marked made in China, and guess what they do here? They sharpen the blade.
Yep. No more made
Gone.
in China stamp and
It's all gone. And that company, and I would probably get in a huge lawsuit if I revealed the name because it's a fairly well known company. Let's just say that I know intimately, and the that's some of the you know that's some of the lowness that some of those people are willing to stoop to,
mm-hmm.
uh, and a bad person's a bad person. That's like I said about the character. I can't teach you
Right.
character. You either have it or you don't. But what happens is as a result of that is, yeah, that's greed. That's getting, a 300 or 400% profit on a product, and you're lying and deceiving and all that other good stuff. But we did, by those kind of actions, create our own monster by pushing that money back into China and Chinese manufacturing,
Yep.
and then buying that product and bringing it into the United States. And if nothing else, they're opportunists, and they see the opportunities to make parts and all that, and they're learning how to do it. We taught them how to do it.
Right.
We taught them, your knives are shite. You got to make them better. You got to use these materials. They didn't have a board meeting and say all of a sudden, oh, we can't use unheat treatable steel anymore. We got to make something that's nice and all that. No, it was because the companies that use the Chinese manufacturing as their base of operations, they introduced all of the innovations that come basically from the custom knife making community.
Mm-hmm.
And guys that are willing to go out and try a new kind of material or a new process or new whatever,
Right.
that stuff was transported right over directly to China, and they're like, okay, now our knives are good too. It reminds me of that Saturday Night Live episode when it was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, and Belushi was the real brutish guy, and Dan Aykroyd was a little more sophisticated caveman. And Belushi takes a big club and hits Dan Aykroyd on the head and KOs him. And then he turns around and he goes, "No, I'm smart." Now me smart.
Smartest one left, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it's that same kind of thing. So they didn't even have to invest in a lot of,
right. We handed it to them. That's what I would call people sold out. Like they sold out, and just like they did with most of the other. I mean, we're not the only industry that's happened to.
No, we are not. No.
But still, people were willing to sell out, and again, what makes it ultra frustrating to me is us at this point, the people that are trying to do it the right way, we get labeled as the villains and the greedy ones, while everybody else, they can do it for like we said, no, they can't. Not without the government subsidizing them and using slave labor and everything else. Like the knives are not more expensive to make here just because Americans are greedy and want to make a whole bunch of money. Like that's not what's happening. So kind of along this line, but a little bit off, not necessarily the China thing. This is actually kind of the culmination of the last couple of questions. So something I had a bitch fest about a few episodes ago was about people not being willing to pay their dues anymore. And I get that people can come at business from lots of different angles, that it's not necessarily, there's different views on I guess paying your dues, and putting aside the international OEM stuff, but just say somebody was getting stuff OEM'd in the US, which most of the people that I'm describing are getting their stuff OEM'd in China, just to be fair. But we already know how we feel about that. So that part aside, how do you feel about again, these knife companies, knife brands that are popping up, not the ones necessarily that you're talking about that are like a pure Chinese brands, but essentially what I'm seeing a lot is people that are a
designer.
They're as we call them, they're knife freaks, right? And then they want to become a designer. They draw up a knife, and some of them have some pretty good drawing skills, but basically the bottom line is they never actually make a knife. They draw up a knife, they have it OEM'd, where is beside the point, and then they're a knife brand, right? And it's hard for me to say that that's from a strictly businessman standpoint. Like, no, you don't necessarily have to be an expert at everything that's done in your business. But to me, I think it's something, I think it's just because I'm a knife maker at heart more than a businessman, and then I'm a craftsman and an artist at heart. It just really irks me to see people doing that without being willing to, like, I just feel like you should actually learn, at least if you don't want to make them ongoing. I feel like you should at least be able to make a knife if you're going to have a knife company.
I mean,
Yeah.
Like,
would you hire a grass cutting company if the owner didn't know how to cut the grass? I mean,
well, it depends. If they
Yeah.
did a good job cutting my grass,
Yeah.
I wouldn't really
maybe.
care,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean,
So
No,
I can see both sides of it, but
no, it's we take great pride in that, in what we make and what we do. I'm talking for all of us right now.
right,
And so we're proud of it, and we know what dues we have paid. We know what sacrifices we have made. So when you see that, I'll just say this: Beyonce is not a country singer, and
no,
I think you know what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
The award ceremony may say different, but no, she's not.
Yeah.
Of course,
So
neither are a whole lot of the people that are actually on the country stations these days. But
not anymore.
yeah,
But I wanted to bring something up. Gosh, I'm going to escape my mind now. But it was on that same vein about the. I was, I get approached by a lot of guys at shows and things like that. They want to show me some of their stuff, and they ask me what I think of it and all that. But at the same time, a lot of very established, well-known knife makers will come up and show me stuff and all that. And there's one guy that he's well known as a tactical knife maker, and he brought a knife over to me, and he said, "This is my latest, MX 99-23, blah blah blah. What do you think about it?" And he's been a friend of mine for years, but I was like, God, you want me to be honest? I said, because again, any kind of tool, it has to feel. You have to feel. It has to feel right, because it's not going to be right unless it feels right. And he handed me the knife, and the first thing I noticed was there was all kinds of there was sharp checkering on it. There was a bunch of sharp angles. There were, like when I said about dehorning a
right.
1911, you take that out of the box and shooting it, you're going to have blisters and dings and cuts. And I just looked at him and I said, "John," we'll make the name up. I said, "John, have you ever used a machete?" And he looked at me and he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Have you ever used a machete?" And he goes, "No." And I go, "Well, here's the deal. Go get one. Look at the handle. Are there any sharp edges, sharp corners, sharp checkering, scallops, pinch points? Is there any of that on one of those handles? Because I'll guarantee you this. If you took a handle, that's why they're not on a machete, because if you took
Right.
something like that out in the field or into the jungle, you would have blisters within the first 2 or 3 minutes of using that, let alone being able to use it all day long." And I said, "Well, let me make it even a little more real. To pick up a hammer, are there sharp points and projections and finger grooves and all that kind of stuff on that knife?" No, because you use a hammer all day long and it's smooth. Now, some of the rubber coated ones, which I don't like, I'm an S-wing guy, but I said that the reason is the same. So if you're making a tool, if you're making something that you genuinely are going to put in the hands of somebody who's going to use it hard, whether he's a rancher or a plumber or a carpenter or a soldier or anybody, you've got to make that knife designed for hard use. And I don't mean that it's unbreakable or anything like that. I mean that a person can put it in their hands and they can use it for 2 or 3 hours at a time if they have to, and they're not going to have these hot spots and things in their hand. And I said, "I'm sorry, but," I said, "in my estimation, you asked me if an honest opinion, this is not a tactical knife, because it would never, I would never, ever take a knife like that into an environment where that was the only knife that I was going to ever have to use in a hard use situation or anything."
Right.
And so it fits that same idea when you're saying, have you ever made a knife?
Yeah.
How about, have you ever really used a knife?
Right.
I mean, there's a big difference, and sometimes those things go hand in hand. I like knives. I can design a knife. The hardest thing you've ever done with it is open up some boxes from Amazon. Uh, that's not a problem. if you say I'm making knives that I can open boxes from Amazon as a casual use thing, but if
Right.
you come out and you come into my world and you say I'm making tactical knives and I'm known as a tactical knife maker and I do this and that, then you and I'll have to have a conversation about what a real tactical knife is. And it fits the same bill as when the guys do the you got to have we make the knife and then we make our own tool for unscrewing the special handmade
Right.
screws that we make and all that. It's like, dude,
Right.
think about an AR-15 for gosh sakes, man. You know, you're not going to carry a tool bag with you just to fucking put a new scope on or something.
And if
Come
you
on.
do, it'll be the first thing you lose.
Yeah. And so I got it. And again, it's a little bit of sour graping, but when we were talking about the genre of tactical knives, now they've gone into, they're almost back to the pre-tac where they're all fancy and pretty and the guys are
Right.
calling them tactical
I was
knives.
going to ask you about that. It seems
The
that
dress.
tactical has almost, ran that course where the
Yeah.
quote unquote tactical makers are starting to trend more to art,
Yeah.
beautifying pre-tac, as you say, sort of
And
for the
that's
sake of
100%.
design and, just making something different and cool. And,
Yeah.
I found myself falling into that trap. I've designed knives that
Oh,
were not comfortable, and
yeah.
I'm like, oh well, that's the problem.
And there's no problem. That's all well and good because you or any other knife maker still has to put the bread on the table at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. I got it. That's fine. But that's why when I mentioned about the boutique staying small, I know that there's enough hardcore tool using guys out there to be able to buy the amount of knives that we produce. See, that's the other thing.
Right.
Uh, if if you made a knife that had features on it that could only be used underwater, I'm making this up,
Right.
but a knife would only work underwater. Well, you've limited the amount of people that are going to be able to buy that knife and use it.
Right.
By me making a tactical knife and staying the way I am, because again, we get the criticisms like Ernest Emerson's never evolved as a knife maker. He got to a certain point and then he fell flat, and now he couldn't design a good knife or anything like that. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. Believe me, I'm a fucking fighter. I'll take any shot you want to give me, and I'm still in the game. The point is I understood I couldn't be Gerber or Buck or anything because they have to build enough knives, or I mean, they have to do enough variety to sell 1 million knives a year, which is
Right.
what some of those companies sell. That's a fact.
Right. Yeah.
I looked at it like Paul Reed Smith and said, not every guitar player on earth is going to spend $5,000 or $6,000 for their guitar, but I know there's enough guys that can appreciate that and do it. I'm okay with that. That's exactly where we're at. We're okay with me making the same knives and not evolving as a knife maker in some people's estimation. That was my goal. It wasn't that was my goal. So I'm not, it doesn't offend me when people do that. And it doesn't offend me when people do variations on a theme, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I am a little touchy about my original, I've back to the hammers. I've always told people, look, I make Estwing hammers with sharp edges. That's it. That's my bar that I set.
Right.
And that's when I'm the most comfortable.
Right.
But like I also said, there are going to be people that will buy something that you make if it's something that they identify as coming from you. You know what I mean? And that's why it's some of those long-winded answers. But
Segues really well.
Yeah, I was on that note. Buying the maker and being like, sort of, you are the face of marketing. You are the, sort of the brand in a lot of ways. And like we were talking beforehand, and we admire your ability to, like, the way you've built a strong brand, not just the nuts and bolts and the edges and the blades themselves, not just a knife, but you've built a brand, sort of community, a club, a community of like-minded people around that. What was your, like, did you have any sort of approach, like, I guess, intentional approach to the way you sort of built your branding and your marketing? for such a loyal following?
The answer to that is no. It really is no. The way that this evolved, and I'm aware of it, believe me, but I was just who I am. It doesn't matter. I'm the same guy today as I was 30, 40 years ago, and it was easy because you know, I grew up in a family that had high regard for honesty and integrity and morals and courage and all of those good things. And thank God it carried over. I hope, because I see it carrying over into my children. So it came from somewhere, but it was really easy because I'm just who I am, and I guess people kind of identified with that. And the real answer to that question is the people that bought an Emerson knife are the ones that built my brand. They did it. We may have seen things and put a little gasoline on it that to or fertilizer more or less. But we were just we just were who we were, and it was a genuine thing. And I think people identify with that.
Yeah.
And it was because I loved it so much. I was never going to, I was never going to deceive anybody or do anything that, my name's on name's on the company, my
Exactly.
family's names, my mom and dad, they're both passed away, but, I have to honor that I need to stand up for the integrity of that name and what it represents and what I feel it represents, and what was handed down to me. So I'm never going to, that's part of that whole thing, that I can't put my future in someone else's hands, because, it's like Bud Light. Oh man, what a mistake that was. Shouldn't have let that guy run with that. But you know what I'm saying? It's the same principle. And, I guess people identify with that because there's a lot of honorable people out there and a lot of people that aspire to those goals and things like that. So it's just been fun. I never looked at anyone who bought an Emerson knife as a customer. I looked at them as a friend, and welcome to my house. Come on, let's have a beer or a shot of whiskey or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Because we were lucky in that a lot of people saw that, and they like I told you, the guys, my biggest advertising was always word of mouth, forever and ever. And but it's treating people with respect. It's listening to people. It's never ever assuming that what you have to say is worth any more than what anyone else has to say, and to live by those kind of standards. It was, I've had people tell me, Ernie, I've known you for 35, 40 years. You've never changed. You're the same today as you were back then. And I've had so many people come and go. These are people even in the industry, and they've said there's just been so many people that have come and go because the minute I wasn't useful to them, they dropped me like a bad habit. And I said, well, I never treat a friend that way ever. And so I don't see people as friends. We've got, like I said earlier maybe I didn't mention it, but some of those vendors that we were using back in the days when we were in our garage, some of them actually came to work for us.
Oh, wow.
And so it just was a cool thing. They felt comfortable with us. They knew we weren't going to harm them in any way. And I don't mean, maybe harm isn't we wouldn't take advantage of them in any way where they didn't feel they were being treated fairly and everything else and important to us and all that. So that's kind of how that happened.
Gotcha. That's sort of what I imagined. It's
pretty much me too.
You kind of, you let your personality out and people like it or they don't.
Right.
And,
Authenticity and you like you said, you've stayed in your lane. Basically,
Yeah.
you do your thing. You're not out chasing all the trends. And one other thing that I think I would bring up is that, and it's just part of you being you, but a lot of people aren't willing to do this. Like they're not willing to stand up for their beliefs and stuff. Like you're willing to vocalize and actually say what you believe in and stuff and take a stand. And I think a lot of people are way too scared to take a stand. They think, oh, don't talk about religion or politics. Like you gotta, just keep
Yeah.
everything neutral, and those people, the ones that are the most like, it just makes you gray and vanilla. And
Yeah.
if you don't stand for something, then what are people going to stand behind? People aren't going to
Yeah.
stand behind you if they can't see what you stand for. So,
Yeah.
do I think I need to be on the soapbox every week preaching about politics and whatever? No, I don't need to go overboard with it. I'm not a politician. But I also, to even him on the podcast and when he worked for me and like our son works for us, I know there's been multiple times he's like, yeah, you shouldn't mix politics and stuff. And I'm like,
I've heard that same thing
yeah,
here.
but like, and I don't go overboard on politics in general, but
Yeah.
even like I was talking about the China stuff, like for a lot of people that would be, no, I'm not going to talk about it. But like nobody's going to get behind somebody that doesn't stand for something. Like if you can't let them know who you are, and the ones that don't, stand for the same stuff, then bye. Like there's
Yeah.
enough other people out there, just like you said, there's enough people that are going to want your type of knives.
Yeah.
There's also enough people that are going to believe in what you believe in that to have
Oh
plenty
yeah.
of customers. Like, and that's
Well, you're 100% correct. And I'm going to add one thing to that.
all right.
There's way more of us than there is of them. We
Yeah.
just don't realize it sometimes
Yep.
because we don't
Agreed.
have the bullhorn in front of our face.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too that I've come, I've felt a certain amount of obligation. It's like, no, I don't have a huge platform, not anywhere near as much as you do, or, and you don't as much as some of the other people out
Yeah.
there, but I feel like there's a certain amount of obligation that goes with having a voice is like, if you don't express yourself then and tell people, what you think or what's right or wrong, then you're kind of one of those people that, the good men that stand by and do nothing while evil prevails,
Yeah.
and I just felt
100%.
certain amount of obligation there as you get more of a voice and more of a platform, feel like you should use it. So,
Well, it's funny. It reminds me of a quote by Muhammad Ali, where he said, half the people love me and half the people hate me, but they fill the stadium.
there you go. That's right.
Half of them want to see me get my rear end handed to me, and half of them want to see me win.
Yep.
It's funny because as a knife maker, this is kind of weird, but I have had, I wasn't really keeping track, but I've probably had about good 3 or 4 death threats from people that wanted to kill me.
Wow.
And it's for whatever reasons, but part of it is the fact that I have always spoken my mind.
Right.
A couple of them were because of some things that were going on behind the scenes. I remember I threatened to do. I don't want to get into graphically, but we were dealing with some guys that were taking young children and using them as sex slaves and stuff like that. And I remember because I did a lot of stuff that didn't. Most of what I did as a grown up had nothing to do with knives, but it led to the knife making because I had a lot of things that I did with knives over the years and stuff and other weapons and shit. But it was I threatened a bunch of people that were in high positions from another country. Let's just call it an Arab country.
Mm.
And the State Department at that time said, "Oh man, Ernie, we're getting some flack about this," and so you got to be on your toes for a while because there's some people that really took great offense to what you were saying, and they're bad guys, and they are doing exactly what we were up against. But those things happened a couple times, but the other times it was literally really just because I spoke my mind, and it rubbed people the wrong way. And it's like,
Yeah.
if I ever see you, or if I ever blah blah blah, you better watch out, because I'm going to kill you, and et cetera, et cetera. And at the time I was working with a lot of organizations that we could vet stuff and get, is this credible or not, or whatever. But I just wonder how many other knife making company owners and all that get death threats on a regular basis.
Not too many. But
Probably
again,
not, yeah.
I do think that is a huge, the same reasons that you got the death threats are part of the reason that you have such a loyal brand. And I don't know this, but it popped into my head because I've had multiple people in other industries where I talk about how that if you have customers, and I always use Harley Davidson as like the prime example, that if you have customers that are like getting your logo tattooed on them, then like you are doing something right as far as a brand. And I would be willing to bet, I have no idea, but I would be willing to bet that your logo is probably the most, if not at least one of the most, if not the most tattooed logo out of any knife company. So that, like I said, using that as a measure of brand loyalty, that
Yeah,
I'd say that's a pretty good
that's a
testament.
pretty deep statement by people. And
Yeah.
I always ask them, like, are you sure?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, actually, it's funny because I was interviewed by Forbes magazine one time, and we were talking about that specifically. And he said, Ernie, there's only one other company that I'm aware of that actually has people tattooing their company logo on them their bodies. And he said, you know what company that is? And I said, yeah, I do. It's Harley Davidson. He goes, you're the only other company we've ever run into that had that kind of brand loyalty.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's a personal decision by the people that want to do that. But I said, we're not surprised, because I'm telling you right now, there's people that if I placed a phone call to some of my loyal Emerson followers or whatever,
Yeah.
man, they'd be here in a heartbeat
Oh, I
if I was
don't
in.
know. More than
Yeah,
giddy to be coming, I'm sure. Yeah. Now that's definitely a testament to the brand loyalty. And again, back to what I said, you don't get people that try to just play it right down the middle and play it safe and never speak their mind and stuff, that get that kind of, you don't get that, you don't earn that kind of brand loyalty by doing that. It just
well,
doesn't happen.
it's again, I use all these slogans and things, but they're part of me because I follow them. And the one that comes to mind is stand for something or die for nothing. And a lot of people, it's the old Teddy Roosevelt statement, where he was, most people lead lives of quiet desperation and never knowing, being tested in the arena. I'd rather have. I'm paraphrasing it and butchering it, but I'd rather have won and lost than to have, not tried at all, kind of thing.
Yep.
And but that's true, and that has nothing to do with knives. That just has everything to do with life. And you know, you you do need to figure out who you are, in life, and that's part of what we try and do with all of our employees too. Is my we have weekly meetings, and they're more like I don't know, they're more like a philosophy lesson than they are a business meeting most of the time, because my goal with the employees also, like I said about producing better men or better individuals, is if I can convince you to quit your job here and go on to be a policeman, or to join the military, uh, or be a fireman, or go on and raise a family and be a good parent, or quit drinking, or whatever in the hell it happens to be, then I've done my job. And it's not going to bother me that you come into me and say, hey, Ernie, I like it here, but I'm going on to something bigger and better. It's going to, even though it might hurt us, it's like, well, we'll do every single thing we can in our power to make your dream come true. And
Yep.
it's, I feel like I've done my job then as a person.
Right.
And so, it's I've had a lot of guys want to kick my ass. I'll tell you that in the internet community. Let's just say that.
Wanting
nobody's
to,
ever,
being willing or able to do.
Yeah, nobody's ever stepped up to my table, because there's a couple times I've said, "Look, you guys know around the
yeah, it's funny how you never see these people at shows, isn't it? It's like all
No.
the naysayers and all the crap talkers. It's like everybody that comes up to a show are just so friendly and happy. It's so weird. Yeah. But I think a good phrase that popped into my head when you were talking about the employees and stuff is that, and I feel the exact same way, like that we're not just building knives, we're building people. Like we want if whether they stay with us, whether they move on, whatever, we want people to end up being better for having been here and being around us. Yep. Right. So whatever that looks like for them, like you said. So yeah. Well, trying to be respectful of your time. We've pushed it a couple of hours now, and I don't want to be too greedy with your time here. So I could literally talk the rest of the day, but
we could, yes.
We should probably wrap it up so that you can get on to other things. We really, really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, the fact that you came on at all, much less to have ended up being our first guest, was we couldn't have asked for better. So
you know what? It's so much fun. I really love talking to people that have interesting points of view and are able to communicate. I mean, for gosh sakes, that's a problem that a lot of people have. They just don't have the ability, or they don't communicate like we should. And to do something like this, for gosh sakes, it's an honor that you guys would consider having me on, because I'm just a knife maker.
Oh, well, I get it to some extent, but that's an understatement. But just like you said, you're not even your employees. You're actually helping to build people, everybody that you touch. So that's phenomenal. And I think that's actually, not to go down another rabbit hole, but that's something that's downplayed too much in our current environment, is that people are almost encouraged to, like, kind of the old hiding your light under a bushel parable deal. Like, people are encouraged to, not, you said multiple times in this thing, that you weren't trying to be braggadocious or whatever, and you're not. But our current society makes people feel like they have to, say that kind of stuff because, he's just showing off, or he's not humble, or whatever. Yeah. Well, how can you be the example that you're supposed to be if nobody gets to see what you're doing? Like, there's nothing wrong with showing what you're doing, because if not, even if you're the best person in the world, if nobody gets to see it, then you're not doing a very good job of spreading your example. So,
back to your baseball team, best baseball team, but only baseball team analogy.
Yeah. So, but anyway, we greatly appreciate it. If you ever want to hop back on and chat some more, let us know. But and we'll be. Looking forward. I'm assuming you're going to be out at Utah at Blade West.
No, we're not.
Okay.
We've got some other things that got in the way of that this year. We're actually we're doing our own knife show up in Colorado. It's called the Emerson Rendezvous.
Oh, wow.
And but it's an invitation only one. We've trying to bring back, as you guys might be aware, the Usual Suspects, the USN
I did
Gathering.
that show for several years.
Yeah. Well, it's whether or not it's going to happen again, I don't know.
Right.
But it hasn't happened this year or last year. So we had so many people that were like, God, I miss it. Because, again, it's a big family reunion of all those people. Yeah. And so we said, well, let's do something ourselves and just give some of the people a chance to get together and shoot the breeze and show knives off to each other and all this and that. That's what we're doing right now and this year. And it kind of interfered with me getting ready to go to Blade West or any of that good stuff. So, but we'll get it all ironed out in the end, and off we go again.
If you're not going to do Blade West, that's a perfectly acceptable reason not to. That's awesome. So, well, that's awesome. I've embarrassingly have never actually made it up to talk to you at a show, and I just, matter of fact, I barely make it up to talk to people I already know. It's just you know how it is.
No worries,
but it's something it's always been on my list, and every time I've ever walked by, you've of course covered up with people, so I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy buttoned up in there. But anyway, I for sure will need to come and shake your hand in person at the next show we're at together. So
anytime, any place.
we
Both you
greatly
guys.
appreciate it. If there's anything we can do for you, just let us know, and we will hopefully do it
Just
again
keep
sometime.
charging hard, man. That's the main thing in
All we know
life.
how to do.
Yeah.
Most people don't. They're not willing. They want the result, but they're not willing to put out the effort.
Yeah.
And,
I'm way too stubborn for that. All
all
right.
right,
We,
guys.
we greatly appreciate it, guys. We appreciate you. You guys know the deal on comment, like, and make sure. I'm sure all of you are already following Emerson Knives and all that. But if you're not, correct yourself and get that taken care of. And we will see you next week.
And let your freak flag fly.